So what we decided to do in Agile 2 was take a both and way of thinking. I learned about both and when I took an improvisation class. It was actually called something like Improvisation for Agile, which was really cool. And my takeaway was this concept of how you need to build on things in order to become generative. And yes, exactly. Yes. And oh, you taught my class. Coop is here. How cool is that? Wow, that's very exciting. I love that class. Maybe you could tell me the name of it. I can't remember the exact name. I'm looking in the chat. Oh, this is so exciting. Anyway, I really love that. It really helped me think differently about things. And so, you know, as Agilists, one of our hardest jobs is to hold paradox. And I think many of you might know what I mean by this, but it's the idea of allowing two superficially or seemingly contradictory things to both be at least partially true, right? So that there's usually more to the story, and simplistic interpretations of what's going on aren't going to get us too far. So these are the Agile 2 values that we came up with. And, you know, folks have asked me in prior talks, why did we go with the standard format of values and principles? And I think the answer is that's an age-old way of thinking about ways for humans to be with each other. I was a philosophy major in college, and I wrote my senior honors thesis on moral philosophy. And the concept of values in the first place was what drew me to Agile when I first came across it, when I was an instructional designer working for the government. And I loved the way that the values and principles gave us these core bedrock beliefs that we could operate from, and they weren't prescriptive, right? They didn't give super details about every little thing. They were sort of general. These are the things that we care about. These are the things that are important to us. And that really appealed to me a lot. And, you know, when I was younger, it was really easy for me to divide the world into good and bad. And the older I got, the more I realized that everything's really just a mix, right? Sometimes a totally crazy mix. And so when we're trying to figure out what to do, we need to be mindful of the context in order to allow for complexity. So looking at these values, if you look at thoughtfulness and prescription, the idea here is that there are situations where prescription is called for and is actually in the best interest of everyone involved. And I'm thinking specifically here about an experience I had with a young group of software engineers who had just graduated from college. And they were all like, either they had just graduated months earlier or maybe within a year. And they were all together on a team, and they'd never done Agile before. They didn't know anything about Scrum, and they weren't senior experienced software developers. And they needed prescription, they needed guidance. And unfortunately, in that scenario, they didn't really get it. And so they really struggled. And so they kind of made up process and made decisions on their own the best that they could. But in that particular case, I think some prescription might have been really helpful for them. But when we do provide prescription for teams or for people, we need to do it thoughtfully, right? We need to really think about what we're doing, think about the context and the environment and why it's important to make the choice to offer something prescriptive. Outcomes and outputs for us, you know, there are no outcomes without outputs, right? We value outcomes a lot. And if we don't get the outcomes we seek, there's no point to anything that we're doing, right? But if we don't have outputs, then we can't get to outcomes. And so we value both of these things. And we think that it's important when you're dealing with metrics that you consider the relationship between your outputs and your outcomes. We don't think that outputs are more important in the sense that, outcomes are more important in the sense that you would measure those and not measure output. Sometimes you do need to measure output, as long as you keep in mind that your ultimate goal is the outcome you seek, right? Individuals and teams, this speaks to our deep belief that to some extent, the Agile community focused so much on teams that the individuals got a little bit lost in the shuffle. And we think individuals and their quirks and differences from each other are really important to pay attention to, so that we can create working environments where individuals with all of their various ways of feeling and thinking and being can succeed and be productive and do good work for whatever goal it is they're trying to reach.